Hello, welcome back. This is the People and Culture Essentials videocast brought to you by the People and Culture Association, also known as the PCA. I'm Jonathan, I'm the coordinator at the PCA, and once again, welcome to these Fridays videocast. I like saying welcome back because we keep doing this almost every Friday or every fortnight, and you are free to join us, of course, on this live access shows, of course, streaming to you live on LinkedIn and YouTube. Please do join us at the PCA, become a member pro. I will be sharing some details about that with you. There'll be a kicker at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to drop in a line and I can share with you more details about how you can become a member of the PCA. But we got a fantastic conversation lined up for you. And what a day to be talking about sales, right? I was in a queue trying to get a Coldplay ticket since morning today, and I didn't get any. They literally sold out a dozen shows across Europe. I mean, I'm not sure about how they do this, but maybe we can get down to that with Richard today. But we got a fantastic conversation, of course, as I was saying, and we have Richard Few who's joining us. Of course, he is the founder and chief geek at Sales Geek. Let's get down to that. And he's changing the world, changing the way the world perceives sales. That's going to be an interesting thing as well.
Yeah.
He's an insider 42 under 42. He's an egg chaser. Let's see how we can get to the bottom of that. And he's a below average dad dancer. Now we don't have an opportunity for that in the base video cast, but let's see how we can find time for that as well. And of course, speaking to him is the very gracious David Liddle, who is the CEO and chief consultant of the TCM Group, the president of the PCA and the founder of peopleandculture.com, and who's working very hard on his next book, People and Culture. And of course, congratulations, David. 3 back-to-back nominations from the Personal Today Awards. So a great weekend for, I guess, all of us here joining. And the Pace Videocast is going to be a nice free chat forum, and please feel free to use the chat box in both LinkedIn and YouTube. Send in your comments and questions for both David and Richard, and they will pick up on anything that they find relevant to the conversation and take it forward. I'm going to now pop into the background and hand it over to David and Richard to take this conversation forward. Over to you, gents.
Fantastic, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Was that a plug, Jonathan, to see if you can get hold of some Coldplay tickets? I think there's a message out there. If anyone can help Jonathan with his Coldplay tickets, please do help. But Richard, about today's conversation, we met each other. We were trying to figure out sort of around April time up in Bolton at the wonderful Wellbeing Farm and Northwest Employers Engagement Group, and it was great meeting you there. I've been really excited about having you here. So a very warm welcome, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. So, as Jonathan said, we're kind of your work is very much in the area of sales, but you spoke passionately about creating a positive and values-based work-based culture within your own organisation, and also sharing some great insights. So I'm excited to dig into some of that stuff. But let's find out a little bit about you first, if that's okay. And perhaps you could just tell us. I'll ask you to introduce yourself in a moment, Richard, but what's the place that you've visited in your life that's had the biggest impact on you?
Well, that's a great question. I think my initial reaction was to go to somewhere kind of like nice and tranquil and sunsets and inspiring cities. But actually, I told the story recently. 15 years ago, I ended up in hospital and I had to have a fairly significant piece of surgery, which left me with 1 and a bit lungs, which has made some of the adventures I've had since quite exciting. But actually, at the ripe old age of 24, as I was at the time, I met some people and saw some things during that time that materially impacted how I viewed the rest of my life and my own mortality, being brutally honest. So I think if I had to say one place, it would be Harefield Hospital in northwest London. That definitely, at 24, changed the course of probably my career and my outlook on life generally, I think.
Wow. In what kind of way? What sort of change did it bring about for you, Richard? What was that?
I think when you're in your mid-20s, I think you're immortal, aren't you? And old people get sick, and you don't ever realize you're gonna be an old person one day. And yeah, I think through what happened to be, more importantly, what I saw, it's a specialist lung and heart hospital, Harefield Hospital. Yeah. So people that are in there are pretty poorly, and there was 3 or 4 people that I met across the 2 stays there, which aren't with us anymore, and wow. That was very evident. That they weren't long for this world. And I think, again, at 24, as I was at the time, it was the year I got married as well, 2008. It was a lot went on in that year, and there's one particular individual that I met who gave me some pretty sound advice, actually, in life, which was that he just said to me, he said, there'd be a lot of things you think you won't be able to do, but like go and prove yourself wrong and go and do some stuff and have some adventures and take some risks. And yeah, his words are still ringing around in my in my ears. That guy was Jeff, but he was a poorly guy and he was recovering from surgery. He was a type 1 diabetic, which meant that his recovery from surgery was very complicated. And yeah, he subsequently passed on within a year, actually, of me meeting him. But yeah, it gave me I have a slight disadvantage when it comes to cardiovascular activities, kind of running and playing rugby and climbing mountains and stuff, which is all stuff that I enjoy doing now. But I kind of embrace that disadvantage now as a result of that conversation I had with him in that hospital.
Wow. Okay. Well, rest in peace, Jeff. And sounds like a very inspirational figure. And whereabouts? It's a beautiful. Is it a cathedral behind you there, Richard? Whereabouts?
Yeah, so that's Blackburn. That's Blackburn Cathedral. Okay. So, yeah, probably not necessarily famous for its cathedral, Blackburn. Probably more famous for its once decent football team.
And what's kind of, is that your hometown, Blackburn? Is that where you're?
So we live in a small town about 25 minutes up the road from here called Clitheroe, which is in a beautiful part of the world called the Ribble Valley up in Lancashire. Yeah, we moved up here nine and a half years ago. It'll be 10 years in January that we moved from the southeast. So I spent the first 30 years of my life growing up in Buckinghamshire, and then through work actually, and the company I was working for, we got the opportunity to relocate, and we took it. And yeah, it's been our home for nearly 10 years now. It's now the home to our business too. So yeah, we love it up here.
And tell us more about the business, Richard, and Sales Geek. I mean, tell us what you do and how you kind of landed in that space.
So Sales Geek, I suppose we are now driven by our mission to change the way the world perceives sales. But if I'm being brutally honest, at the beginning, it was for more selfish endeavors, which was to not be miserable anymore in work. I founded a business in February 2017, but the journey probably started in August 2016, where I was 32. I was global sales director for a $300 million North American PLC, and I'd had a good career. For someone that left school at 16, I'd done reasonably well in my career, but I loved what I did, but I didn't enjoy doing it where I was doing it. And the career path that I was on meant I'd be doing that in bigger and bigger businesses. And I just didn't fit into that environment. So I had a really simple concept at heart, really, which was the concept of providing part-time sales directors to small businesses and ultimately democratizing access to a sales director that is generally unaffordable for businesses until they get to a certain size.
Yeah.
And most of them, unfortunately, don't make it to that. They don't make it long enough to get to that size where they could afford it. So I felt like if I could prove there was a need for what I did in a part of the country up here where I'd not lived for very long, then I think I wrote in the business plan, we could have a Sales Geek in every county of the UK. And we're now on that path towards doing that. We've diversified into sales training as well. And we have our online academy, and we now have a more diverse product set. But at the core of what we do, we make sales directors more available to small businesses.
That's amazing. And so what impact does that have on a small business? Because as you rightly said, I think organizations often succeed or fail based on their revenues and their profitability. I mean, I suppose that's stating the obvious. So at the heart of that is the ability to sell more than you spend, I think is a basic principle of running a successful organization. But organizations don't have the resource, certainly in the startup phase, to be able to build that sales capacity up. And I'm kind of interested to know from the work that you do, what kind of impact does it have on your customers to have the access to that democratization of this sales expertise?
Yeah, I guess at a practical level, it's key to the business, but actually, on a human level, we have a lot of people and a lot of business owners at the point they've reached us. They're having sleepless nights, they're stressed, they're worried, they're not paying themselves very much money, they're wondering how they're going to afford a family holiday this year. Without the tap being on at the front end of the business in that sales revenue, a business can become a very stressful place to be as a business owner if you haven't got income coming in. And sales doesn't solve everything, but I would argue that if you've got enough revenue coming in, it gives you the means to positively change some of the other challenges that you have in a business too. So yeah, most of our clients are what we'd class as being pre-sales director in their growth journey, and they've either got no sales engine, and the founder owner is exhausting their network, and they're out and they're at networking meetings at 5 o'clock in the morning and doing whatever they can to generate income for their own business. And or some of them have started building out a sales engine. They're finding that stressful too, managing salespeople, having never done that before, and have probably wasted some money and had some trials and tribulations along the way. And yeah, when one of our geeks steps in and becomes that interface for them, and helps them build up that engine and better communicate what they do to the outside world, it's a game changer. And for some people, that's about scale up and success and the rewards that come with it. There are some people we meet, it's the difference between survival or not as well.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, and it's absolutely critical because people are pouring in their lives, their passion, their enthusiasm, everything into it. So it is a critical interface between success and failure. And I mean, but a lot of people think about sales and they'll use phrases such as targets and data and KPIs and clicks and inquiries and cold calling. So there's kind of language that goes around sales. I think there's a lot of stereotypical language and a lot of misunderstanding. But when you and I shared the platform in Bolton, what I was really inspired by listening to you speaking is you were making a connection between the way that you wanted to create your own organization, but you also saw organizations, particularly small businesses and others more widely, and a relationship between sales and your own organization and people and culture. And that was really interesting to me to hear you making those connections. I just find curious to know a little bit more. Where do you see this sort of space and the connection between what you're doing on sales and culture and people within the workplace?
Yes, it's a good question. It's a big question.
We like big questions at the People and Culture Essentials videocast, Richard. Better to do.
I probably got a couple of angles on that. So yeah. I guess from a mission perspective, I say we have a clear mission. We want to change the way the world perceives sales, and the reason why we want to do that is sales is a bit of a dirty word, and most people that are in sales aren't particularly proud to be in it. It's not an aspirational career choice for a lot of young people, and it chews up and spits out a lot of people, and has a bad rep for you've got to watch films like Wolf of Wall Street and Boiler Room and kind of like the glamorization of the bad side of sales. And actually, on the main, that isn't sales, and it's a great career choice. It can be a great profession if you apply yourself to it and you get into the right businesses. Unfortunately, however, there are a lot of organizations where their sales culture is really, really poor, and actually often it's almost entirely separate to the culture in the rest of the organization. It has its own culture. They pay people differently, measure people differently, manage people differently, and they hire and fire people in a very, very different way to probably what they do in the rest of the organization, particularly with remote and field-based sales teams. And actually, what I've experienced in my life, and I've seen the good and the bad pre-sales geek, and I've also seen the good and the bad through doing what we've done over the last 6 years, that actually when people take that longer term approach to building a world-class sales culture and not being as short-term in their views on things, that actually they can genuinely create something great. And by looking after their people and managing them, recruiting them in the right way, setting the right expectations, the customer gets a better experience because of it. So I guess, with that in mind, through the work that we do, we were keen to make sure we can help and support with that. But also, we wanted to lead the way in here as well. We've got the word sales in our company name, and we wanted to create a culture, and a visible culture and feeling from the outside looking in, whether that's for potential employees for us or our franchisees as they join us, or customers looking at us from the outside, where we genuinely live and breathe the fact that we want to look and feel different within our own space. So yeah, for me, I have a frustration with the sales industry. I have a frustration with how it treats its people in certain environments, and I don't think there's any coincidence that there is a skill shortage now. There's a lack of talent within the industry. It chews up and spits people out, and I think we would love to play our role in making it an aspirational career choice by creating better sales employers and creating better sales careers for people.
Fantastic. I think it's such a great aspiration. Again, with my own experience in my own organization, we used to have a sales team. And exactly as you've described, they're remunerated differently and they almost had this sort of subculture that everyone relied upon them achieving their success because the whole business relied on them. And I think I've seen in organizations where people often talk about culture being the behaviors that a worst behavior a leader is willing to tolerate. And oftentimes if there's a sort of golden star sales performer, they might turn a blind eye to some of their behaviors in a way they might not elsewhere, and almost it's almost that those behaviors then drive the culture, and it can sometimes be a sort of source of toxicity within the organization.
It definitely is, and I think for me personally, I'm a big sports fan, so I often lean back into sport for kind of examples. And I think if you look at how Fergie managed United, that no one was bigger than the team, and it was the same with I'm a big rugby fan, and there's an amazing book called Legacy, which is all about the All Blacks and the culture within New Zealand All Blacks, and they don't tolerate individuals, no matter how good they are and how they're performing. If it's toxic and they're not living the values of the organization, they're really clear. And I think there's lots of examples where people don't do that. They'll keep the star performer because they're scared of the financial result of removing them. The long-term detriment to that organization is significant if they keep that individual in the business. Often it creates ill feeling, it creates friction between sort of sales function and support functions in organizations. And I've seen that play out. And there's always it can be a bit of animosity because the sales team they're out in the field and they're out socializing and doing things and drinking beer for a living, and the guys in the business think that they're living the life of Riley out there. But equally, the sales guys are, I'm working my fingers to the bone here. I'm working 12 hours a day. I'm having to spend my evenings out with clients, and it's all right for you guys. You're doing 8 hours a day in an office. It's 20 minutes from your house, and so you get that animosity anyway. But I think it always takes that on another step when you've got a toxic high performer in there. But it requires a lot of bravery, right, to do something about it.
Absolutely does. I mean, one of the things that I saw again in my own organization, and I've seen in elsewhere, you talked about the sales profession, but I've also seen again that sort of democratization of sales is everyone's responsibility in sales. So the invoice that you send out, the call that you pick up, the way that you might deal with that particular complaint, the service delivery, the follow-up, the aftercare, all of that becomes part of that sort of sales process and feeding into the sales funnel. And in some respects, it becomes hard to differentiate between the sales professional and sales as a function. I just wonder what your thoughts were about the relationship between the professional and this wider function of sales in a small business environment or elsewhere.
Yeah, so I guess depending on the products and service and their routes to market, the human interaction element will vary depending on the product and the routes to market. And often, I think going back maybe sort of 15, 20 years ago, sales was very human centric, and the marketeers create a level of interest. The customer would engage with the business much earlier on in their decision making process because there was less information available through web and social and bits and pieces. And then therefore the balance of ownership would sit with that salesperson. There was a higher burden. But what we know now is that customers engage with businesses later in their buying process because they can obtain so much more information about the product or service. So therefore, the role of that person has changed significantly. And actually in certain sectors, particularly in the B2C space, a lot of customers are almost more technically proficient in the product than the salesperson is at the point that they inquire into the business, potentially. So therefore, for me, great salespeople have to have high emotional intelligence and be great relationship builders and human experts, actually. And I think this is where a lot of organizations go wrong. They recruit salespeople, and most of the onboarding, David, at that point is product training. So it's kind of like, here's 2-3 days or maybe a week, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know about the product. Here's a phone, here's a laptop, go and make some sales. But actually, the best salespeople in the world, they're human experts rather than product experts. They're experts in people. and they understand how to qualify, they understand need, they understand how humans behave and what they need. And I think the days are gone now of just puking up features and benefits to customers and hoping they buy your stuff because they already know that information.
Absolutely, and they can even get, even with rise of AI, they can get even more information and almost become a product expert. So that adage of people buy from people they trust and people they like. And if you understand their needs, their goals, their aspirations, and can lead into the human side of it, you're likely to be far more effective as we're working with more educated, more informed customers who can make decisions not based on features and features, but on advantages and benefits. It seems what you're saying, Richard. Yes. So the human touch is the competitive advantage.
I think so. I think we it's not a shameless plug, by the way, but a lot of our content centers.
Shamelessly plug, Richard. This is your moment. Plug away, and even if you drop a link, a website, and I know for a fact Jonathan's going to put it into the feed. That's what this is about. Plug away.
Yeah, no, but a huge amount of our ethos as a brand is around not just the psychology, but the sort of the neuroscience of how people make decisions and human behavior. And I think when you meet salespeople with really high EQ, they will be higher performers than salespeople with great product knowledge. And if you can combine the two, then great. But if I had to make a choice between people experts and product experts, I'm taking the people expert every day.
And how can I've got loads of questions. I'm kind of veering off all the questions. What you're saying is fascinating. So I'm the chief exec of the organization. I've got a sales team which is centered around emotional intelligence, understands the psychology, really connecting with human beings. How can I maximize that within the organization? So rather than seeing sales as a silo within the business and operates in a siloed way where actually we're then reliant on them for the revenues per quarter, per month, how can I integrate that more widely into the organization while still reflecting and representing and understanding the role that they're playing? And have you seen that done in organizations?
Yeah, so I guess for me, everyone's in sales.
Brilliant. Great.
Whether they've got sales in their job title or not, which even, bizarrely, even people in sales have the word sales hidden from their job titles because sales is such a dirty word. We daren't put the word sales in the job title of a salesperson.
Business development manager or whatever.
Customer success manager. There's so many convoluted job titles just to try and avoid the word sales. But again, that is a byproduct of the fact it's a dirty word and people are scared to admit what they do. So I think for me, in any organization, everyone's in sales. And I think even more so now, like as a business and a brand, there's never been so many lenses in which people can view you from the outside, and through web, through social, through doing these types of activities as well. There is so many ways to look at an organization from the outside that it can't just be the salespeople that are the sales force. For me, it has to be the entire operation. Like, I am as much a part of my sales force as the salespeople in my organization. People will see me and the brand from the outside. They will see Lucy. They will see the other directors. They will see people in our team that are out delivering services, not necessarily generating the income, but the window is open now. Like we live in a curtainless society when it comes to being able to look at organizations from the outside. Therefore, everybody in the organization, for me, the best organizations, and I suppose this leans into, I guess, where you guys are at, but the best organizations are full of people that live and breathe the values, the personality of that organization. And I think if that's consistent, like you talked about trust earlier, trust is built through familiarity and consistency, amongst other things. So if you say you are something and then you look like you are that thing, people are more likely to trust you. Whereas if you say you are something and then people look at you from the outside and you behave in a different way through some of your employees' activities on social media, the things that they engage with, the things that they say, then people are going to go, hang on a minute, these two things don't match up. And it's like a moth at that point. You can't trust where it's going, and people don't like it.
It's fascinating. Danny and Lisa, thank you so much for your comments. And I think, Danny, to your point, it's a shame that sales often has this reputation. I think we're hearing some great ideas and feedback here about how to change the perception of sales and how to change that within the world, which obviously is very much your purpose, Richard. But when we again referencing back to the conference that we both spoke at recently, you made this phrase, and I went and spoke at a group to a group of very senior managers in a local authority, and I used this quote because I thought it really captured the essence of what this organisation was about. And the quote that I heard you say was, "We borrow our people from their families, and we should send them home in the same state or better state at the end of the day." And I've been talking to this group of leaders, and they've been listening to me and taking the odd note. As soon as I said that, every head went down. It really connected with people. I think it's such a powerful statement. And I just wondered, from the work that you're doing and what you're seeing, could you say a little bit more about that? And what can organisations do to ensure we do send our people home? We are borrowing our people from our families. It's such a powerful way of describing it. What can we do to send them home in better state than when we borrowed them in the morning?
Yeah, I think that. So what's interesting with that comment? We talk about it behind the scenes here, in particular with me and Lucy. We're a husband and wife team. We're 2 of 4 directors in the business, and Lucy, from a dish perspective, is kind of that the high green. She's really emotionally intelligent, and she is the mastermind behind a lot of what we do. But I guess ultimately, in terms of where that come from, we've both worked in environments where we've not enjoyed ourselves, and we felt like we've exhausted ourselves through being involved in those environments. And I guess part of what we wanted to do was to prove to the world that you can kind of run a successful, profitable organization that does good things, but do that by leading with kindness and doing the right things by people. And I spent parts of my career coming home absolutely exhausted, drained, with nothing left to give to my son and my wife and my friends and my hobbies. And I suppose we believed in a world where that didn't have to be that way. And I think part of my frustration is, the Industrial Revolution is long behind us, right? And a lot of what happened during that. But actually, I think there's certain sectors of industry that haven't left it as far behind as they think they have, and in their attitude towards people. And I guess, you can't ever guarantee, that's going to return value. You can't ever guarantee that that's going to buy you loyalty from people forever. And we don't measure it in that way. We measure it in happiness. We measure that in fulfillment. We measure that in getting messages from our team's family members saying thank you. That's how we measure that. But for us, if we work hard at that, and that to your question, it comes out in different ways. It comes out in, I think we do lots of little things reasonably well. I think we've got a lot of things we could do better for sure. But I think we do a lot of little things well. We celebrate success. We celebrate milestones. We celebrate things that are important to them as well. So we acknowledge their children's birthdays. We make sure that there's not. I hate the thought of anybody sat in here on their kids' sports day. We make sure that people at key family events, that we recognise when they're having tough times at home, and that seeing where we can help them with that and support them through those difficult challenges, because that is part of what you're investing in. When you invest in another human being, you have to take what comes with them at times. And there might be times where things are going swimmingly at home and there's no issues. And there's going to be times where they've got some real challenges. And I think you inherit responsibility, I believe, when you bring somebody into your team, not for all of what happens in their personal life, but certainly how it's going to affect them at work. And we can't, we're not narcissistic enough to believe that we can help everyone with everything all of the time. But I think by leading with kindness, by leading with tolerance, by understanding what they want from life and what they want from their career, then we're best placed to serve them.
I was just about to say, I wish we were recording this, Richard, but we are recording this. And I hope people are going to go back and rewind that last 3 or 4 minutes segment and just really listen very deeply to what you're saying, because it's so powerful and it's so meaningful. And it's really interesting. If sales has been a sort of driving force of capitalism, post-industrial revolution, as you said, I think we perhaps haven't left those dark satanic mills as far behind as we might have thought. But let's not move into that space. But if it's been a driving force of capitalism, capitalism is defined by profitability and sometimes profit at all costs. you're talking about a very new and very modern and very progressive form of capitalism, because it's still about driving and developing capital and profitability through sales. But you're using the words, I wrote these down as you were speaking. I don't think I captured all of them. You're talking about happiness, appreciation. You're showing gratitude and celebration as being meaningful outputs of a business, as much as it is about generating that profitability. And that's what I also think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I didn't hear this being a dichotomy between business success vis-a-vis profit and bottom line growth, and treating our people well and doing everything that you've just described. I saw those being aligned, and I just would love to hear your thoughts about that alignment, because some people might go, well, you can't do that because it's got to get the money in, but it's absolutely not what you're saying.
No, we don't do it for a financial result. I think, do we think that longer term we'll have a happier, healthier, more profitable business as a result of having happier and healthier team members who are invested in our purpose and our mission and our values, and also who get some reward from that profitability too? Yeah, I do. I think we will, but it's not the main driver behind it. And I think it's also important that we not just celebrate their success, but also share our success with the guys as well. So whether that's kind of profit sharing with them every quarter, whether that's helping them understand what their role truly is in our longer term journey, but it also means that they have to suck it up a little bit when maybe there's a less profitable quarter and it's not, and there is no profit share, right, in certain quarters, because we've invested in growth and we're doing other things. But yeah, for me, it's how do you put a measure on just doing the right thing and being a good citizen? Like, for me, I wholeheartedly believe that there is a big space in the world for organizations that want to grow, want to be profitable, but want to do that whilst looking after people and giving back and doing the right things. And I think, that's easy to say that if you're smashing it and you're massively profitable and you're able to give cash away left, right, and center. But actually, when it really matters is when you're going through tough times. It really matters when you're under pressure and you're under the cosh, and how you treat your people in those times, I think, really matters. And I think we saw that in 2020. I think some businesses were outstanding during that difficult period. Some businesses absolutely put the bottom line first and mistreated a lot of people, and people ran for the hills, and now they're paying the price for it. But yeah, I know I have a bit of a people pleaser driver in my profile, so I like being liked and I like doing nice things. I know there's a little bit of that in there, don't get me wrong, but life's too short to be miserable, isn't it? We, as company owners, as people trying to do what we do, we have an opportunity to make people's lives miserable or happy through the way we treat them. Why wouldn't you want to be surrounded by people that are happier and healthier?
And I'm going to put it out there as well, Richard. I think there is going to be a direct relationship between your business long-term success and that culture that you're creating. And I think that's okay as well. I think it's okay to connect those two together. And I think whilst you are treating people in the way you're describing, you can see thank you, Samantha, so much for joining today's People and Culture Essentials videocast and for sharing your observations and comments. And Samantha really kind of resonates. And I think I can see, as Richard is with me and with yourself, he's really resonating. But I think that is okay to me, is to connect business success and profitability and growth, and also how you're treating your people and creating and developing that culture. And it feels to me, it would feel to me, I think, and working with organizations who share your passion and drive for that positive and constructive culture, is people, when the chips are down and it does get tough, are likely to be more aligned and are likely to be more supportive and are likely to be more flexible and likely to be less suspicious and likely to be less in sense of it's about me rather than about the whole. So you're building an organization, I think, which has resilience within it to manage those tough times, but also under normal circumstances, I would imagine it's going to be a little bit more productive, a little bit happier, therefore a little bit more engaged. The customer service is like to grow. And I think I feel very strongly as I'm listening to you speak that is about building a successful organization, and that's okay. You can have both.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what it does I think if we've been forthright about it, what it does give us in the short term is a level of competitive advantage when it comes to recruiting and retaining people. And I think there are, I mean, I look to the side of me here, looking outside this meeting room, my little boy and one of our team's little boys with their VR headsets on playing in the office, because as a husband and wife team, we have childcare challenges, but so does some of our team. So enabling them to bring the kids into the office in a school holiday is a small thing. Some companies wouldn't ever allow it, but for us, it costs us nothing to just be able to take the pressure off a working parent and say, look, if you want to bring your little one into the office, there's a whole cupboard down the end full of Nerf guns and games and computer games and stuff. Just bring them in for a few hours, get done what you need to get done, go home early, absolutely fine. But I think equally as well, in terms of creating that competitive advantage when it comes to attracting talent, I think the other thing that we're seeing as well, like socially, I think people are more dependent on the workplace for social connection now than I think they probably once were. And I think a lot of the social constructs in society have broken down in a lot of areas, and people aren't going to pubs as much, people aren't going to churches as much and sports clubs as much. And I think a lot more of people's social connection is through the relationships they build at work. And I think facilitating those relationships, helping and supporting that. And does that mean that, like, I'm bothered if someone takes an extra 20 minutes at lunch because they're having a great time and enjoying themselves and building brilliant relationships? No, as long as kind of everyone's making a contribution to the team and pulling in the right direction. We don't penny pinch the minutes, if you know what I mean, and stuff like that. And we want people to feel socially connected to each other, not just the business, but like to each other in the team as well, because the world's becoming a bit of a lonely place for a lot of people at times. And I think, again, we have an opportunity to support with that too.
That's a really great point. I think you've made it really well. I think just to add to Danny's point there, I think he's are you saying hashtag happy bees make tasty money? I certainly would agree with that hashtag, Danny. Let's see more of that on LinkedIn, and let's see how many people we get subscribing to that hashtag, because I think that's exactly right, and I think that is okay as well. And I think from a business perspective, I like the fact that you saw that as a competitive advantage, both in terms of attracting talent into your team, Richard, but no doubt also attracting customers. I think customers would find this very attractive, and I think they do demand more from our organizations. And I was going to make a point about customers, because you talked about the blurring of the lines perhaps between social and work, and I think you made a really interesting and valid point. But we're also increasingly seeing the blurring of the lines between the notion of a customer and an employee. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, because obviously sales is about fulfilling the need and the aspiration of a customer, resolving their problem, whatever that problem is, by providing a solution, and that solution generates value. Profit is the measure of that. If we think about the employee as a customer, we're seeing a blurring of a line between that. What are your thoughts about that? And just as a result of that, do those sales skills come inward at all into our organizations as a valuable attribute that we can be drawing on?
Yeah, I find it fascinating when we meet businesses and potential clients through what we do. One area where we're always really keen to dig into is around their value proposition, and how they currently take their product to market, and how they communicate it, and how they communicate their compelling message to the outside world. And what I find fascinating is some people struggle with that, and they sound a bit me too, and we have to give them a lot of help. Sometimes people have got a reasonably good message. It needs a tweak and a tune. But actually, when it then comes to any sort of value proposition, when it comes to the acquisition of talent versus customers, it's almost like forgotten about, and there's no marketing or commercial budget that goes into the acquisition and or retention often of team members. It's all angled at customers and potential customers. But for me, the key word in value proposition is the word value. And I think, yes, it's about creating a commercial competitive advantage, but it's also doing that in a way where it aligns to the behaviors that are attributed towards your values. And therefore, for me, the value proposition to the outside world of customers should be the same value proposition to the outside world of potential new talent and your existing customers. And the way of attracting them and magnetizing them towards your organization really isn't that dissimilar, I don't think.
And it's really, and we're seeing more and more about the concept of people experience rather than customer experience and employee experience. In essence, two sort of false dichotomies in respects by focusing on people, whether that's external or internal facing. It's about combining those elements of the value proposition and meeting both the needs of both, and recognizing that there's an increasing blurring of lines between those two as well. So again, really fascinating, and I'm enjoying listening to this, Richard, and learning a lot. And thank you so much for all of the comments coming through. And Mary, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for your support as always, and your positive feedback. And we're listening to Richard Few, sort of the head sales geek at Sales Geek, and talking really about sales, but in such a wide context, and in thinking about the concept of sales within an organization. We've been talking a lot today about the relationship between people and culture and sales and value, and we've also been digging into some aspects around that kind of human-centered, human-centric approach that you've been developing in your organization, Richard, and how that can add to your own organization, to your people, and then start to build a powerful platform for growth within your organization, but also for your customers' organizations. To kind of going back into some of those sales skills, if that's okay. I've got so many questions here. Actually, one of the questions I did want to ask you, if it's okay. So the People and Culture Association believes passionately that the future of HR is people and culture. So we're supporting and working with HR teams and organizations who perhaps do classic HR, transactional, process-driven, policy-oriented, to build this focus around people and purpose and values, all the stuff that we're talking about. But sometimes we see everything that you're describing, Richard, is impeded or impacted because sometimes we create a set of rules and policies in our workplace which make it more difficult to be so flexible and so adaptable. And, that may be turning a blind eye to someone coming back late off lunch after 20 minutes. For you, it's very much about letting them to breathe and to be the best versions of themselves. It's not a problem, but the rule book sometimes that's not an appropriate rule we have. So we create this challenge for sometimes between the HR systems and the desire to create the culture. What might you say to? I'm guessing most of your organisations wouldn't have an HR function because you're only bringing in a sales director. But with your experience, would you have any messages for people in human resources, or I hate the term human resources because they're not resource, they're human beings, but in that role or people and culture roles to help support the kind of culture that you're describing and looking and aspiring to create?
Yeah, I think reflecting that from our own perspective first, and obviously then we've seen that mirrored in some of the businesses and clients that we've worked with over the years. But I know certainly for ourselves we were a startup 6 years ago, and we've kind of been going on a scaling journey ever since. And as the business grows and it starts to mature, I think that's a really hard thing to get a good balance of, because you need a level of, I suppose, you're trying to create fairness. For me, when it comes to anything that's kind of where there's written policies and there are rules and guidelines, for me personally, that should be there to create a level of fairness in your society, which is your organization. And I think there are difficult periods through that growth journey when it comes to people and culture and say the HR thing, where you have to start putting some of these things in for the first time, and you're conscious of how you were as a startup for the first couple of years is going to start to feel differently about the phase that comes next. And I guess for me, the ultimate place to get to is to get to a point where it's almost like relatively sort of almost like self-governed within the team. And you see that in the sporting arena, where sort of you've got the captains leading the players, not the managers and coaches. And I know that maybe that's too much to ask for in the workplace, but I think we in our organization, the more formal side of our HR, we use another organization for that, and internally we focus on people and culture, and I suppose the less formal side of HR. But I think for me, you've always got to ask your question: why is the policy the policy? What's it there for, and how are you going to police it? Because the policy is just a policy. I think the how is more important than the what. So I think how you police it and how you implement it is almost more important than what the policy was to start with. And I think you can have policies and rules, and I think you absolutely need to have them to create a level of fair society. But how you then govern them, implement them, police them, how you manage the grey areas, I think you can do that. If you're doing that whilst living your true values, then it will be okay. I think if you if you don't, then you start to create this really confusing space for people. It's like, well, okay, we're supposed to be this fun, cool organization over here.
Yeah.
Really militant about about some stuff over here. And I think that is it's a tricky balance for people to get that.
Massively, and I think it's a really interesting one because I think as organisations grow and develop, as I know yours will, and many of your customers will, with the successful application of that sort of the sales geek within their organisation, so too they grow. But what happens, I think, is we then adopt a sort of set of template policies, which start to think about the people we're working with, not necessarily as the assets that you're describing, but as a risk. And they almost go into risk mitigation and also come retributive, which almost is the complete antithesis of everything that you've been describing. And to an extent, I think that the cautionary note for organisations who are scaling and going through those growth processes and scaling to the point where they need those processes is probably to avoid risk aversion, whilst you still need the rules-based system. Make it less about treating employees as risk and more about optimising them as powerful stakeholders in the workplace, and less about retribution and more about all the stuff you're talking about in terms of sales. It's listening, it's needs, it's engagement, and actually building some of that into the ethos of how we're doing people and culture. I think, for me, from what I'm hearing you say, would actually set a real clear alignment between the culture you're creating as a senior leader and the kind of people and the HR processes, if you will, that we might be needing to deploy as the organisation grows.
Agreed. Yeah, completely agree.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I guess from a leadership perspective, so we have a number of people who listen to our People and Culture Essentials videocast who are in leadership roles or influencing leaders in their organisations. And from a sales perspective, are there any sort of sales skills or tools that you've developed through sales, or indeed in other aspects of setting up and running your own organisation, or post the time at Harefield where you've had that sort of real life change, where skills or strategies that you think could be useful for leaders to be deploying to help them emulate some of the stuff that you're talking about, Richard?
I think the first thing I'll probably say is I'm still very much on a real learning journey myself as a leader. I was a sales director, sales manager in a former life. I led people in the business I worked in before, and I did some of that stuff at quite a young age and had to learn quite sharply. And because of the roles that I had, I couldn't rely just on my background and experience and time served in industry. So I think that probably forced me to work harder to be a better leader. I think for me, the thing that I probably lean on the most here as the CEO of my own organization now is my ability, and the thing I work hardest at, I guess, is my ability to make our vision really clear and visible to people, and talk fluently in the future and where we're going and what we're doing. And our job then is to help align every individual's aspirations to their role in that journey. And I think sometimes that means, and for me, I think that's where some organizations drop the ball a little bit. I think sometimes there's this inconvenient truth and like unsaid thing, I think, in business, where people are scared to talk about somebody leaving, and people don't stay in jobs forever. You get odd, rare beasts where people join a company and stay there for 20 years. That doesn't happen a lot anymore. So we know that people are more transient, and they'll join a business, they'll work in that business for a period of time, and then they'll, for a variety of different reasons. And you can be the best employer in the world, but some people are still going to move on. People move on, and yet we kind of like we don't. I don't think we embrace that yet as a society. That is a norm, and it happens. And I think we should get better at managing that. And I think a lot of that is I don't think we understand clearly enough how we align our vision and our goals for the organization with the individual aspirations of the people in the organization. Because I think if we did, we would know when the end of their journey was going to be, and we'd know that clearer. And through open and transparent communication and one-to-ones, people moving on from an organization for growth reasons or personal reasons would become such a more normalized part of our life. Whereas we kind of try and pretend it's not going to happen, and then it does happen, and it becomes this great surprise for everybody. You're like, well, no, you've got this 23-year-old person. They want to get from here to here. They can't do all of that here for whatever reason. Therefore, their journey was always going to be capped to some point. Why should it be a surprise that in 3 years' time they go and get the job that helps them with the next part of their journey? But maybe I'm not sure it's a British thing or what it is, but it's like it's conservatism around having open and frank conversations about the end of their life with you in your organization and the fact that you're only ever going to be part of their journey. And I don't know why we're so uncomfortable talking about it, but we are, and and those individuals are, as well as we are as the employees. But I think, yeah, if you can get true alignment from vision to personal aspirations, have open and frank communication about that on a regular basis, I think that probably goes quite a long way.
I love that, and I think because we see so many people plans and people strategies which talks about talent attraction, talent retention. But you're talking almost about that sort of talent development and also the evolution of people. I mean, again, talent's not a very great name, they're people, but working with people and in imagining that your role there as an employer is going back to the point of we're borrowing people, we're borrowing them in their career pathway. I think is what I'm hearing you say. We're borrowing them from their families, and we're borrowing them at some stage in their career development pathways. And actually, how do we then help and support them through that process? And again, it opens up a very interesting, a very different conversation about how we might think about the term talent, where we're perhaps being a little bit more honest and open about this is perhaps a step or a rung on a ladder for their own career. I would imagine personally that if you're having those kind of conversations, people are going to be more likely to stay anyway because they feel valued and they heard, and you're actually leaning into what their aspirations are rather than a rigid set of role profiles and objectives and key results and KPIs and so on. It's more, you're making it more about them than you are about you. I would imagine they're more likely to stay.
Yeah, and I think being honest as well with people that I think there's going to be a point in their journey and your journey where just unfortunately there are going to be certain points where for an individual you can't give them what they need next because they need something that's beyond the realms of the business to be able to give it to you. And again, just being open and transparent. And I think you hear so many stories from individuals about I have false promises. It told me I was going to do that next and this next. And I think we sort of sometimes can be in danger of stringing people along to just try and keep them in business a bit longer, which then kind of sours the pot. And I think it is uncomfortable talking about people moving on because we want to believe. I did when I started the business 6 years ago, and we then hired our first few employees, you think everyone's going to stay with you forever, and then kind of fast forward a couple of years, you realize that's definitely not the case.
You get disappointed as well, don't you? Because it feels like you're leaving me personally. So there's almost that sort of thing. But actually, I think you're talking a far more adult to adult type relationship.
We have so like in Sales Geek, we have about a year ago now, we changed the structure of the organization to a holacratic structure, and which is essentially sort of a non-hierarchical.
I was going to say you're going to have to come in and define that term for us.
So the backstory to it is, I guess we started out. There was one of us, then two of us, then three of us, and four of us. And I guess we sort of then did the thing and went, oh right, okay, crikey, we've got enough people now. We probably need a bit of structure, and people need managers, and we've got to that thing. So we then just by accident kind of built out what was a traditional kind of hierarchical structure, and it's myself and the board and some managers and stuff, and it just felt clunky and creaky and not very entrepreneurial and speedy, and there was some natural bottlenecks in it, me being one big one. And then I was privy to listen to a speaker that I was at an event at, and he was talking about different types of structure, and he talked about holacracy or holacratic structures, and immediately it resonated with me, which was this non-hierarchical entrepreneurial structure where you don't have to have a job title to lead a project, right? And you can have, so we have bubbles. We don't have teams in our company. We have bubbles, and those bubbles have owners, but I don't own a single bubble. So I participate in 4 or 5 of them, but I don't own any of them. So I'm hierarchically the most senior person in the business, but I get to go and participate and help and add value to them without being the loudest voice and kind of leader in the room. So, and that also means that people in the team can sit in multiple bubbles, whereas in a hierarchical structure, they'll sit in one team and one department. And it allows people to sit in multiple areas of the business, bring all of themselves to the organization. So most people that you hire have got more knowledge and experience than just the role that they're hiring them for. And typically we don't extract that as organizations. We kind of just hire someone into a sales role, but actually they might have done 5 years in marketing or another area of the business. And with a holacratic structure, it allows you to have people sitting in multiple bubbles, and it removes the hierarchy of the most senior person in the business always being the owner and the leader. And that enables us then to give people exposure to different areas of the business without having to go through the formal promotions and formal things. And it means that people get paid based on value, not job title.
Yeah.
Which is really important for me. However, for a lot of people that have been in the workforce for any length of time, that have been working for 10, 15 years, who are preconditioned to the fact that I can only progress if I move up, it takes a while for them to get their head round. But actually, it creates an environment where you can progress, you can grow, you can earn more money without having to necessarily kind of go up an org chart.
Yeah. Which is great from a small business, because small businesses do classically struggle with the ability to create career progression pathways. You're also addressing that issue about that sort of the limitations of hierarchy, which from a small, or from any business perspective, there are limitations. Yeah. But the idea of those bubbles gives you a space to be able to expand your knowledge, to be able to share your wisdom and expertise. And it sounds absolutely a phenomenal model, and one that we will certainly be exploring in more detail through the People and Culture Association. Richard, but absolutely love it. We're coming to the end of the session, really. I just wanted to kind of get a sense of you outside of work. I mean, the words around compassion, there's mindfulness, emotional intelligence. We've heard a lot about these, but I think you love hiking and climbing and traveling, and you clearly really buy into that idea of kind of work-life balance and all work and no play and all that. So why do you think it's important for leaders to look at to exercise that self-care, which I think from my reading is something that I see as being very important to you?
Yeah, I think there's been times in the past where it hasn't, and I think and I've probably lost my way with it at times when I've had my head buried in kind of startup mode and survival mode in the business and things. But I've learned to become more disciplined with prioritizing my own health and well-being, and you're no good to anybody if if you're sick and you're overtired and you're not in a good place. And I think also for me, I think generally in the world we're in a bit of a comfort crisis, and I feel like things are a bit too easy, right? So we don't move as much. We find it easier to eat foods that we don't have to go and work for, and all these sorts of things. And I think I made a conscious decision about 7 or 8 months ago, actually, to more visibly demonstrate certainly to the team some of the other things that I do. They don't always see that stuff. And I took on a challenge about 4 weeks ago now. We climbed 42 Lakeland mountains in 3 days. We raised about 13 grand for Alzheimer's Society, which was cool. And I shared the whole build up with that to the team. And now there's a few of them kind of starting to do some stuff themselves and get to the gym and do things. And we've not asked them to go and do it, but hopefully through leading and doing, hopefully inspiring other people to stay on top of that. Because like I said earlier, I think we feel immortal up until a certain point, I think, in our lives. And I turned 40 in a few weeks, and so I am becoming a bit more conscious of certain aspects of health, particularly heart health. And yeah, but I love being outdoors. I love nature. I love being up hills generally, and I find it relaxing. I find it helps me be calmer, make better decisions, be a more compassionate leader as well. I'm stressed less when I'm in the office, especially if things are tough and there's challenge going on. I can cope with challenge better when I am administering self-care consistently. That's for sure.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, I think for all of us in leadership roles, I think listening to that is really powerful. I've actually got a walk I'm doing myself. I think we're doing 3,000 meter ascent in Lakeland. So I think we're doing 3 different peaks, which combined give us 3,000 meters at the start of September. So I might be ringing you up for a bit of advice on how to keep the blisters down, because my walking tends to be walking my dog around the field every now and again. So I'm not sure how equipped I'm going to be, but we'll see how we go. But it's been such a pleasure, Richard, having you here today. And thank you to everyone who's joining us. And my final question really is, chance for do an unashamed plug, I guess. Really, is there anything that you're working on, anything that you'd like to share with us that's going on in your sort of professional or personal life that you'd like to share that you've got cooking away at the moment, Richard?
Oh, great question. So I guess from a personal perspective, I took the slightly scary and bold step to enter the marathon next year and got a place.
Wow.
and I would definitely consider myself as not being a runner. I'm short, slightly overweight, and I only have one full lung. So running a marathon, I'm running the marathon for Asthma and Lung UK. I've only literally just set up the Just Giving page because we've only just finished doing the other challenge. So yeah, I've now got my head down now, sort of consistently running 3 or 4 times a week. So yeah, I will be starting to lead into my network pretty soon for some sponsorship and some donations to get me to my target for that. But yeah, that's going to be the big focus. And outside of that, in Sales Geek world, we are just continuing on our mission, doing what we're doing. We are recruiting still consistently franchisees across the UK, and we're just about to have our first US franchisee on board in September, which is a really exciting step. So yeah, stand by for, I suppose, that the next phase of our growth, which is international.
There, you heard it here first. It's fantastic. Well, best of luck as you're bringing on those new franchisees into the organisation. Changing the way the world perceives sales, I think, is very much what you've been doing here today, Richard. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I know people have also, and thank you. You've got some well wishes for your 40th as well, release. Thank you very much for that. We always like to make a small donation. We have a social value kind of project at TCM called TCAIM. TCM. So we'd love to make a small donation to a charity of your choice, Richard. So Jonathan will be in touch after the radio show just to find out how you'd like us to make that donation to. It's something we'd love to do by way of saying a thank you to you for giving up your time and sharing the wonderful Blackburn Cathedral behind you. It's been really great speaking with you. It's been a great view as well. I hope everyone who's been part of today's People and Culture Essentials videocast, you've enjoyed it. I really have. I've absolutely loved it. And I've always thought I love sales. I love that side of running and being part of an organisation. I love connecting with the customers. I think there's so much that we can learn from sales, that we can bring in and support us. I think you've shone the most amazing light on that. If you haven't done yet, please do join the People and Culture Association. It's a wonderful organisation, really shining a light on best practice in the area of people and culture. And as you would have seen from so many of our videocasts, it's a very broad area covering so many things. And we've talked in today about sales and leadership and people and culture and just looking after ourselves as well, which I think is such a fundamentally important aspect of it. If you're listening to us on demand, I hope that you've enjoyed today's videocast. Please do get in touch at peopleprofessionals.org. But for now, Richard Few from Sales Geek, and for everyone who's been part of today's videocast, and of course to Jonathan Rodriguez, our wonderful PCA coordinator, who does a great job of organising the events. A great big thank you to you, Jonathan, and to everyone else. And I hope you have a fabulous weekend. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again, Richard. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.